Good afternoon. So the problem that I'm addressing exclusively in my work looks at, we know we have a shortage of expertise and a shortage of personnel in cybersecurity teams, and so my work is really addressing that. And one of the ways that we address that in IO psychology and human factors is to establish what we call a team selection program. And what that means basically is we select people in based on a profile of human factors that we know are most likely to advance rapidly to high levels of expertise. And so to build on top of that, I'm not just looking at the individual level, but I'm looking at the team level. And so this is a question of team selection and how do we establish a research paradigm to create a team selection program for cybersecurity teams. So I have to give you the obligatory copyright page. There are several different challenges to establishing this kind of a program. One of them is, what do we mean by an expert, which I'll talk about in just a second. The other thing is, how do we measure team performance in cybersecurity? And then how do we measure cognitive profiles of human factors that might predict particular performance loads? So let's just drill into this idea of an expert. What is an expert and how do we get more of them? And so just think about it in terms of your own personal expertise. What are you good at? What are you the go-to guy for? And this is a really critical question to answer, because if we're going to select people in based on expertise, we all have to agree on what we mean by expertise and what is it and how do we see it. When I talk about expertise, I'm talking about the far right continuum of the continuum between novice and expert, whereas other conversations I've had with people kind of centered in the middle. So I'm talking about anomalous performance in a team paradigm. Another complexity that I want to bring out about expertise is that there's two components to it. One is the level of granularity with which you're good at, and I'll explain that in just a second. And the other one is looking at relativism. And so, for example, when a friend of mine comes up to me and asks me, what are you an expert at? I can answer with the first kind of relativism, which is within myself. Well, I'm a better cook, right, than I am a paper writer, hands down. I'm a terrible writer. But that's probably not the answer they were looking for. They might be actually asking with respect to my colleagues, right? So that's with respect to my colleagues in human factors, that's the next level of relativism. So, and truly I'm not an expert in human factors, but I might be a little bit more strong in team performance literature than maybe somebody who does situation awareness. And then the third level of relativism is about an organizational setting where there are multiple job roles. And I've had people come up and say, well, you're the tokens, human factors psychologist. And I'm like, wow, just because I'm the only one? And so we have different meanings for the word expert. We have to be very, very clear on what we mean by an expert if we study it. The other thing about it is I was just talking about at the individual level, but now we're talking about at the team level. So let's take a look at a dummy team on the screen. And the person in yellow supposedly is the expert that we're targeting. And I wanted to say that, one of the challenges we have is we can have an expert team, and it might just be because we have one tremendous person on the team. I've seen examples of that. Or it might be that there's absolutely nobody on there that's really amazing. They just work well together collectively. And so we're trying to figure out, well, how do we put together teams that are going to be experts? If we continue on with this example, let's just say this is a musical quartet, right? And everybody on there plays a different instrument. And the person in yellow is the violinist. So is that person the expert violinist because they're the only violinist on the team? Or are they an expert at particular note sequences? Are they an expert at particular pieces of Bach and Vivaldi that have a particular tempo? So we have to be really clear. Whenever we say we're targeting experts, we have to say they're an expert at this level of granularity with respect to whom. And we have to be very clear about that as we go forward. And I only try to belabor this point because we often get into research paradigms where we want to study something, but we haven't thought deeply about the problem. So I take a little bit of time to articulate the problem. Now, in human factors, we have to be able to identify experts. So we do that by looking at their performance. And we say that basically anybody who is a good expert should be able to perform in a way that we can measure. And so we traditionally look at like generic terms like speed and accuracy, and we measure people on those two particular dimensions. But they're not equally weighted across disciplines, and that's really critical. So for example, if you're a violinist or a musician, accuracy is important but not speed, because speed is dictated by the tempo of the conductor. So, accuracy of the note playing is absolutely critical to expertise and usually distinguishes people from one from the other. In long distance running, how many runners do we have in the room? Well, couple, right, joggers, I'm more the jogger. And so getting across that finish line as quickly as possible is the key to expertise. People who can do a 4-minute mile is amazing to me. I consider them the expert. In cybersecurity, it's a little bit different. And I'm not sure the relative balance between speed and accuracy, but we have to be careful about that. One of the things that I believe and I'm trying to investigate is that with teams that are high functioning and more expert than novices, they have really accurate performance. So there's a threshold with which all these really great teams have accurate performance. But what separates the men from the dogs, sorry about the colloquialism, is that they are probably very quick and very speedy with respect to their accurate performance. So we're trying to figure out what combination of speed and accuracy really intimates the really advanced levels of the teams. Why do we care? There's 4 quick reasons. We have expert systems that are based on expert judgments, but we still don't know how to measure them. We don't agree on what they are, et cetera. We have created socially elected experts that make policy decisions, and yet we don't really know for sure. We do know that people who are socially elected as experts are not always experts in their performance, so we have to be very careful about that. Again, we're establishing personnel selection programs based on what we think an expert looks like and how they behave and how they perform. And we train people to be like experts, but we don't really know how they perform very well in cyber yet. There are a couple of other points I wanted to make, and that is we can spend a lot of time understanding and researching exactly who is an expert and what makes them an expert. It doesn't matter, though, if you put them into an organizational context that encumbers their development of expertise. So you spend all those resources putting them in, and they fail to reach their potential because the organizational and the contextual impacts encumber that process. If we take a step back and learn what we know from prior research on what human factors actually have a relationship with the development of expertise, we find things from the cognitive abilities literature, from personality traits literature, and from attitudes and beliefs. So these are some of the things that across disciplines, they seem to matter in terms of the development of expertise. And our contribution is we're going to reinvestigate a little bit more on the personality side. I think that it wasn't real well done, so I want to go back and see if there are relationships with certain kinds of personalities and the expertise development, as well as look at things like metacognitive skills and teamwork skills. And teamwork skills includes things like leadership. It includes troop leading procedures, communication strategies, etc. This is a multi-year effort, and I don't remember offhand off the top of my head how long it took the FAA to establish the air traffic control selection program, but it was about 10 years. And so we've done phase 1, which is job analysis work. We're in the middle of phase 2, and phase 3 is next. And I'll sort of dissect each of those phases and what we've learned. So from phase 1, what we did basically was a job analysis review, and we were looking for factors from our participants that kind of identified, related to experts that they remember working with in the field. Now again, we're dealing with socially elected experts, not people that they can actually validate with performance metrics. But it's good enough just to get an idea. And we aggregated all of those and then tried to relate those back to the research literature. Now our target population is a little odd to people. We use malicious code reverse engineers, and the reason for this is that we weren't interested in their technical competencies in cybersecurity. We were more interested in the cognitive profile attributed to anybody who can develop that expertise. We seem to believe that it's sort of independent of their actual expertise that they're specializing in. So we were looking for those cognitive factors. And malicious code reverse engineers have seemed to have been at this level of expertise in order to function well. You had to be at a higher level of expertise than other job roles because the work is very complicated and it's interdisciplinary. So the research question was, we were just looking for predictors of the development of expertise in this population. Now, based on the prior research, we had to make sense of the wild, wild west. We had to bin it into groups. We had to figure out what factors were we finding across domains that seemed to matter in terms of the development of expertise. And we binned them into these groups, And at the bottom level, I said domain-specific knowledge and skills. So these like KSAs, competencies. We didn't focus too much on that, even though we know there's a relationship between that and these other ones above that. But we were more interested in metacognitive skills, teamwork skills, personality, and work history. And this slide is just sort of a quick and dirty overview of some of the results we found. When we came into that study, we asked people, tell us about the new hires that became amazing. What things do you remember that in the interview process that seemed to indicate or gave you confidence that they would be amazing? And we created a profile of attributes there, and we binned them and grouped them based on that last slide. And we also asked them, tell us about the experts you've worked with in the past. Tell us about them. How did you identify them? What makes them unique? Etc. And then we created a profile. And what was interesting was there was some degree of overlap, but then there was some degree that never did overlap. And there are pages and pages of results, so I won't bore you with all that, but that was just the main point I wanted to bring up. Lastly, in that study, we also know that organizational, from the prior research, we know that any time a person is taken off of task and they don't have enough time to develop their expertise, it's a real encumbrance. And so the more time you spend developing your expertise and working with the task work that's relevant, the more likely you were to really advance. And so we found in our sample that people would say things like, well, when I was distracted, I can't become an expert. If I'm distracted, if I have policies and procedures that really make it more administrative, or I can't get to my work, I can't get access to my work. So those are real critical key points. The current work is a little bit more complicated. This is probably the bane of my existence as the researcher here. Basically, what we had to do is develop metrics in this phase 2. We had to figure out how do we measure teams of cybersecurity analysts and be able to measure them well. And we had to figure out how to measure these human factors that we found in phase 1 that were interesting. And then find a statistical relationship between the two. But the metric part is very difficult. We use, so our population here is just cybersecurity defending teams. And so we were looking at military CPTs, et cetera. And we had to chase the teams because, of course, they're not going to let you come into operations. So we had to go to these unclassed events and partner with those people in those collaborations and study their teams. And so we were at Tracer Fire, and we're getting ready to do another round of Tracer Fire. Cyber Endeavor in Monterey, Cyber Shield is 20 teams coming up in March of next year. And we do some capture the flag events. So we actually get a chance to collect data off of these teams at these events. The task performance metrics, these are the metrics on this is what they're doing in real, like with respect to their competencies or technical competencies. And so Rodham is actually working at the individual level, how you measure a person's capabilities or competencies with respect to cybersecurity. So he's working on that, which is nice. And I need that information in order to understand how we put together the team. And we also have borrowed other team metrics at that level from other federal labs. And these things look at speed and accuracy as well as mission essential tasks. How well did they perform against the assigned mission essential tasks they had to complete? Our test battery is just a smorgasbord of personality, interaction or interpersonal skill sets, team interactions, looking at leadership, and then bio data like their resume data. And we're trying to put that together, and we're trying to see if we can get that relationship with all those human factors with team performance and establishing that kind of statistical relationship. And as time goes on, all those things, all those items, all those factors we're screening in this test battery will just be refined and reduced and refined and reduced. So we start with a very big test battery, and then we reduce it as we go because we're starting to find validity, predictive validity in our findings. So lastly, what does this work do for anybody? Well, we've had a very controversial, I wouldn't say controversial, but it was a very interesting discussion about professionalization in cybersecurity. And so I'd like to read the definition because I know how to read, and also because I think it really touches in upon my work, which is professionalization is the social process by which any trade or occupation transforms itself into a true profession of the highest integrity and competence. And we wanted to get that into cybersecurity, but in order to do that, we have to start with measuring what is integrity and what is competence. And so that's partly what my work is about. And with all due respect, I wanted to thank Roger Beard. I know he's in the audience, but he's helped me quite a bit. And then other people like Bronwyn Woods and other collaborators from other federal labs who've helped me with this work. And this is my contact information.